The day Mr. Stephen learned that love could be louder than fear began with a knock on the door that sounded like a small hammer striking his chest. It was still early morning. The sun had not fully climbed into the sky, and the house was quiet except for the ticking clock in the kitchen. Mr. Stephen stood in the hallway, holding a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. He did not move right away. He listened. The knock came again, firm and patient. He took a deep breath and opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and wet leaves. Two boys stood on the porch. They were thin, pale, and soaked from head to toe. Their hair clung to their foreheads, and their shoes were muddy. One boy was taller, about 10 years old. The other was smaller, maybe 7. They held hands so tightly that their fingers looked locked together. "Dad," the taller boy said. That single word broke something open inside Mr. Stephen. He had not seen his sons in almost a year. For a moment, none of them moved. The rain fell harder, drumming on the roof and the porch rail. Mr. Stephen's mind rushed with thoughts, memories, and regrets. He remembered bedtime stories, scraped knees, laughter in the park, and the night everything fell apart. He remembered promises he failed to keep. "Come in," he said at last, his voice rough. "Please. Come in." The boys stepped inside. The warmth of the house wrapped around them. Mr. Stephen closed the door and leaned his back against it, as if the door was the only thing keeping him standing. The boys looked around, unsure. The house was clean but lonely. One couch. One chair. No toys. No pictures on the wall. The smaller boy, Leo, looked up at him. His eyes were blue like the winter sky. "Mom said we could come," he said softly. "She said you would help." Mr. Stephen knelt down, right there on the floor. He did not care that his pants got wet. He pulled both boys into his arms. They smelled like rain and soap on the road. He held them tightly, afraid they might disappear if he let go. "I'm here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." Later, after dry clothes and warm soup, they sat at the kitchen table. The rain slowed to a whisper outside. The boys ate quietly at first, as if afraid the food might vanish too. Mr. Stephen watched them, his heart full and heavy at the same time. The taller boy, Mark, finally spoke. "Mom is sick," he said. "She's tired all the time. She sleeps a lot." Mr. Stephen nodded. He had heard bits and pieces before, through short calls and long silences. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have been there more." Mark shrugged, trying to look older than he was. "She said you were scared." Mr. Stephen felt the truth of that like a stone. He had been scared. Scared of failing. Scared of not being enough. Scared of being a father alone. When his marriage ended, fear had pushed him away instead of pulling him closer. "I was scared," he said honestly. "But I'm not anymore." Leo smiled, a small, hopeful smile. "Does that mean we can stay?" The question hung in the air. Mr. Stephen looked around the small kitchen again. He thought about his quiet evenings, his long work hours, his simple life built to avoid pain. Then he looked at his sons, their eyes watching him closely. "Yes," he said. "You can stay. As long as you need." That night, the house changed. Mr. Stephen pulled out old blankets and set up beds in the spare room he had used as storage. The boys explored the house, opening drawers, peeking into corners, laughing softly like they were afraid to wake a sleeping giant. Mr. Stephen found an old box in the garage filled with forgotten things. A small wooden train. A soccer ball with a crack in it. A picture book with torn pages. He brought them inside. Leo hugged the train like a treasure. Mark bounced the soccer ball once, then twice, grinning. The sound echoed through the house, and Mr. Stephen laughed before he could stop himself. The sound surprised him. It felt new and old at the same time. When bedtime came, the boys climbed into their beds. The room smelled of clean sheets and soap. The rain had stopped, and the moonlight slipped through the window. will you stay? Leo asked, already half asleep. Mr. Stephen pulled a chair close to the beds. I'll stay, he said. He watched them until their breathing slowed and evened out. He noticed how different they were and how the same. Mark's serious face, always thinking. Leo's open heart, always hoping. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, heavy but right. In the quiet, memories returned. The arguments. The words he wished he could take back. The day he packed a bag and told himself it was for the best. He had believed distance would make things easier. He had been wrong. Now, sitting in the dim room, he made a promise. Not out loud, but deep inside. I would do better. The next morning came too soon. Sunlight filled the house, bright and warm. The boys woke early, full of energy. They ate toast and eggs, and crumbs covered the table. Mark asked about school. Leo asked about the park. Questions flew like birds, one after another. Mr. Stephen felt tired, but alive. After breakfast, they walked outside. The air was fresh, and the world felt clean after the rain. The street was quiet. Neighbors waved. Mr. Stephen felt a strange mix of pride and fear. He was not sure what the future held. He only knew it would not be easy. At the corner, Leo slipped his hand into Mr. Stephen's. Mark walked on the other side, close enough to touch. Mr. Stephen looked down at them and smiled. The house behind them was no longer just a place to sleep. It was becoming a home again. And though the road ahead was long and full of mistakes yet to come, Mr. Stephen knew one thing for sure. This time, he would not walk it alone. The first real test of Mr. Stephen's promise came on a Monday morning, when the alarm failed to ring and the house exploded into chaos. Sunlight was already climbing the walls when Mr. Stephen woke with a sharp sense of panic. He sat up fast, heart racing, and looked at the clock. He was late. Very late. In the next second, he remembered something else that made his chest tighten. The boys. He jumped out of bed and rushed down the hallway. The door to the boys' room was open. Mark was already dressed, his shirt tucked in the wrong way, his hair sticking up at the back. Leo was still in bed, wrapped in his blanket like a burrito, eyes half open. Why didn't you wake us? Mark asked, trying to sound calm but failing. I'm sorry, Mr. Stephen said, running a hand through his hair. That one is on me. Leo sat up slowly. Are we in trouble? No, Mr. Stephen said quickly. No trouble. We just need to move fast. What followed felt like a small storm trapped inside the house. Toast burned in the toaster. Milk spilled on the floor. One sock went missing. Mark could not find his notebook. Leo decided he did not like the shirt he had chosen 5 minutes earlier. Mr. Stephen moved between them, cleaning, answering questions, tying shoes, apologizing again and again. By the time they stepped outside, all three were breathing hard. The school building rose in front of them, large and busy. Cars lined the road. Children ran past, laughing and shouting. Mr. Stephen stopped at the gate and looked down at his sons. Everything okay? He asked. Mark nodded, but his shoulders were stiff. Leo squeezed Mr. Stephen's hand tighter. What if they ask questions? Leo whispered. What if they ask why we came late? Mr. Stephen crouched down so they were eye to eye. You tell the truth, he said. And if you feel scared, remember I'll be right here after school. I promise. The boys walked in together. Mr. Stephen watched until they disappeared inside. Only then did he turn and head to work, his mind still with them. All day, he worried. He worried about teachers and classmates. He worried about old habits and new routines. He worried that he would fail again without meaning to. His job felt distant and dull. Numbers on a screen meant nothing compared to the image of Mark's serious face and Leo's hopeful eyes. When the workday finally ended, he drove to the school early. He parked and waited, hands resting on the steering wheel. Children poured out of the building like water from a broken dam. Mark came first. His face was tight. "How was it?" Mr. Stephen asked. Mark climbed into the car and shut the door. "Okay," he said. Then, after a pause, "Not really." Leo arrived a moment later, looking tired but calm. He waved at a boy across the yard before getting in. On the drive home, the car was quiet. After dinner, Mr. Stephen sat with Mark at the kitchen table while Leo played on the floor with the wooden train. The room was warm and softly lit. "Tell me," Mr. Stephen said gently. Mark stared at the table. "Some kids remembered me," he said. "They asked where I went. One of them said my dad left us." Mr. Stephen felt the words hit him like a slap. "I told him he was wrong," Mark continued. "But he laughed." "I'm sorry," Mr. Stephen said. "I should have been there." Mark looked up, his eyes bright. "I needed you there." The truth of that settled deep into Mr. Stephen's bones. He reached across the table and placed his hand over Mark's. "I'm here now," he said. "And tomorrow, and the day after that. I can't change yesterday, but I can show up today." Mark nodded slowly. Later that night, after the boys were asleep, Mr. Stephen sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It felt full instead of empty. He thought about his own childhood. A strict father. A silent home. Love that was shown more through duty than words. He had promised himself he would be different, but fear had pushed him into the same patterns. The next morning, he woke before the alarm. Breakfast was calmer. He packed lunches, checking twice to make sure nothing was forgotten. He walked the boys to school again. This time, Leo skipped. Mark talked about a science project. Small steps, Mr. Stephen thought. Just keep taking them. Days turned into weeks. The house filled with noise and life. Shoes piled by the door. Drawings appeared on the fridge. The spare room slowly became a real bedroom, with posters and books and folded clothes. Mr. Stephen learned to cook simple meals that did not come from a box. He learned which foods Leo loved and which ones Mark refused to eat. He also learned how tired a person could feel and still keep going. One evening, a letter arrived in the mail. Mr. Stephen recognized the handwriting right away. He sat at the table and read it slowly. The boy's mother wrote about her health. About good days and bad days. About relief that the boys were safe. About guilt and gratitude mixed together. At the end, she wrote one line that stayed with him. "Take care of them the way I know you can." Mr. Stephen folded the letter and held it for a long time. The real challenge came when the school called. It was about Leo. Mr. Stephen arrived to find Leo sitting in a small chair, swinging his legs. A teacher stood nearby with a tight smile. "He got into a fight," the teacher said. Leo looked down at his shoes. "He said Dad doesn't want us," he whispered. Mr. Stephen felt anger rise, sharp and hot. He pushed it down and knelt in front of Leo. "Look at me," he said. Leo looked up, eyes wet. "That is not true," Mr. Stephen said firmly. "Not even a little bit." Leo nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. On the way home, Mr. Stephen talked about words and actions, about telling an adult, about walking away. Leo listened quietly. That night, Mr. Stephen sat on the edge of Leo's bed. "Are you mad?" Leo asked. "No," Mr. Stephen said. "I'm proud of you for telling me." Leo smiled and rolled onto his side. In the darkness, Mr. Stephen felt something shift inside him. He realized that being a father was not about never making mistakes. It was about staying. About listening. About choosing love again and again, even when it was hard. He stood up quietly and closed the door. Tomorrow would bring new problems. New fears. New chances to fail. But also new chances to get it right. And this time, Mr. Stephen was ready to try. The first winter with the boys arrived quietly, like a secret the world whispered instead of shouted. The air grew colder each morning. Leaves disappeared from the trees, and the sky turned pale and heavy. Mr. Stephen noticed the change not only outside but inside the house too. The boys caught colds. Shoes stayed damp longer. The heating bill surprised him. Life felt tighter, slower, more serious. One evening, as the wind pressed against the windows, Mark sat at the table with his homework spread out in front of him. His face was tense, his pencil tapping again and again. "I don't get it," he said. Mr. Stephen pulled a chair beside him. "Show me." It was math. Fractions. The kind of thing Mr. Stephen had not thought about in years. He stared at the paper, feeling foolish. "I'm not sure I remember this very well," he admitted. Mark sighed. "Everyone else's dad knows this stuff." The words stung, even though Mark did not mean them to hurt. "Let's learn it together," Mr. Stephen said after a moment. They walked slowly. They made mistakes. Leo joined them, pretending to help but mostly drawing shapes on scrap paper. It took longer than it should have, but when Mark finally understood, his face lit up. "Oh," he said. "That's it." "That's it," Mr. Stephen smiled. That night, after the boys were asleep, Mr. Stephen sat alone again. The old fear crept back in, quiet but sharp. What if he was not enough? What if love was not enough? The fear followed him into the weeks that came next. Money grew tight. Work hours were cut. Mr. Stephen began skipping small things for himself to make sure the boys had what they needed. He told himself it was fine. He told himself it was temporary. But children notice more than adults think. One Saturday morning, Leo watched Mr. Stephen put on the same jacket he had worn all week. "Why don't you buy a new one?" Leo asked. "This one still works," Mr. Stephen said lightly. Leo nodded, then disappeared into his room. A few minutes later, he came back holding a small plastic box. "You can have my coins," he said. "For your jacket." Mr. Stephen felt his throat close. He knelt down and hugged Leo tightly. "Thank you," he said softly. "But I'm okay." "Really?" That afternoon, Mark asked a harder question. "Are we staying forever?" he asked. Mr. Stephen paused. "What do you mean?" "Here," Mark said. "With you?" Mr. Stephen understood what Mark was really asking. Was this real? Or was it temporary, like before? "Yes," Mr. Stephen said. "You're staying. This is your home." Mark studied his face for a long moment, as if looking for cracks. Then he nodded once. That night, the power went out. The house fell into darkness, sudden and complete. Leo gasped. Mark stood up fast. "It's okay," Mr. Stephen said calmly. "It's just the power." They lit candles and gathered in the living room. The shadows danced on the walls. Outside, the wind howled. "Tell a story," Leo said. Mr. Stephen hesitated. He had not told a story in years. "Any story," Leo added. So Mr. Stephen began to talk. He told them about his childhood. About growing up in a quiet house. About wishing someone would ask how he felt. He spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. Mark listened closely. Leo leaned against his side. "I didn't know you were scared too," Mark said quietly. "I was," Mr. Stephen said. "I still am sometimes." The power came back, but they stayed where they were, wrapped in blankets, closer than before. A few days later, a letter arrived from the hospital. The boy's mother was getting worse. Mr. Stephen read the letter twice, then a third time. He felt the weight of it settle on his chest. That evening, he sat the boys down. "She's very sick," he said gently. Leo's eyes filled with tears at once. Mark stayed still, his face pale. "Can we see her?" Leo asked. Mr. Stephen nodded. Yes. We can. The hospital smelled like clean air and sadness. Machines hummed softly. Their mother looked smaller in the bed, her skin pale against the white sheets. She smiled when she saw them. My boys, she whispered. They held her hands. They talked about school, about silly things, about the wooden train. Mr. Stevens stood back at first, then stepped closer when she reached for him. Thank you, she said quietly. For staying. I should have stayed sooner, he replied. She shook her head slightly. You're here now. On the drive home, the boys were silent. That night, Leo crawled into Mr. Stevens' bed without asking. Mark followed a few minutes later. They lay together in the dark. What if she goes away? Leo whispered. Mr. Stevens swallowed. We'll love her, he said. And we'll take care of each other. The days after that were heavy. The boys became quieter. Mark tried to be strong. Leo cried more easily. Mr. Stevens made mistakes. He snapped once when Mark forgot to do his chores. He raised his voice and saw Mark flinch. I'm sorry, Mr. Stevens said right away. I shouldn't have yelled. Mark nodded, surprised. It's okay. No, Mr. Stevens said. It matters. Slowly, trust grew deeper. Winter passed. Snow came and melted. The world softened again. One morning, as spring began to show, Mark brought home a school form. It's for parents, he said. Mr. Stevens took it, his heart pounding. He signed his name without hesitation. That night, as he watched the boys sleep, Mr. Stevens realized something important. He was not perfect. He never would be. But he was present. And for the first time in his life, that felt like enough. Spring did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces. One morning, Mr. Stevens noticed a single green leaf on the old tree outside the kitchen window. Another day, Leo ran inside shouting that the air smelled different. Mark started leaving his jacket on the chair instead of wearing it everywhere. The house felt lighter, but the worry never fully left. The phone rang one afternoon while Mr. Stevens was washing dishes. It was the hospital. He listened quietly, his hand gripping the counter. His face stayed calm, but something inside him sank slowly, like a stone dropped into deep water. After he hung up, he stood there for a long time. The sound of the running tap filled the room. Then he turned off the water, dried his hands, and went to find his sons. They were in the living room. Leo was building a road with his toy train. Mark was reading on the couch. We need to talk, Mr. Stevens said. Both boys looked up at once. He sat down across from them. Your mom is getting weaker, he said carefully. The doctors are doing what they can, but she may not have much time. Leo's lip began to shake. Mark's hands tightened around his book. Does that mean? Mark began, then stopped. Mr. Stevens nodded slowly. Yes. It might. Leo burst into tears. He ran forward and buried his face in Mr. Stevens' chest. Mark stayed where he was, his eyes fixed on the floor. Mr. Stevens held Leo and reached out a hand to Mark. After a moment, Mark took it. The days that followed felt unreal. They visited the hospital often. Sometimes their mother slept. Sometimes she was awake and smiling, even when she was tired. She asked about school. She listened to Leo talk about everything and nothing. She held Mark's hand longer than before. One evening, she asked to speak to Mr. Stevens alone. The boys waited outside in the hallway. She worries about them, the nurse said softly. Inside the room, the lights were low. The machines beeped steadily. I need to know they will be okay, she said, her voice thin but steady. They will, Mr. Stevens said. I promise. She searched his face. You're scared. Yes, he admitted. That's good, she said. It means you care. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Be patient with Mark. He hides his pain. And hold Leo when he cries, even when it's hard. I will, Mr. Stevens said. A few days later, early in the morning, the call came. Mr. Stevens woke the boys gently. He helped them dress. No one spoke. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Their mother passed away just after sunrise. The room was quiet after. Too quiet. Leo cried openly, loud and broken. Mark stood still, his face empty, as if he had turned to stone. Mr. Stevens knelt between them, holding them both. I'm here, he kept saying. I'm here. The days after bled together. There was a funeral. There were people Mr. Stevens barely knew, offering words that felt too small. There were flowers and food and soft voices. At home, the boys changed. Leo clung to Mr. Stevens constantly. He followed him from room to room. At night, he refused to sleep alone. Mr. Stevens did not argue. Mark went the other way. He became quiet. He did his chores without being asked. He spoke less. He stopped asking questions. One night, Mr. Stevens heard a sound from Mark's room. He opened the door quietly. Mark was sitting on his bed, holding a photo of his mother. She won't see me grow up, Mark said without looking up. Mr. Stevens sat beside him. She knows who you are, he said. And she's proud of you. Mark shook his head. I didn't say goodbye the right way. There is no right way, Mr. Stevens said. Love is enough. Mark's shoulders began to shake. The tears came at last, heavy and silent. Mr. Stevens pulled him close and held him until the shaking stopped. Grief settled into the house like a long winter that refused to leave. Mr. Stevens made mistakes again. He forgot meetings. He burned dinner. He lost his patience one afternoon when Leo spilled juice everywhere and started crying. He raised his voice. Leo froze. The look on his face broke Mr. Stevens' heart. I'm sorry, Mr. Stevens said immediately, kneeling. I didn't mean to scare you. Leo nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. Don't go away, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Stevens said firmly. Never. That night, Mr. Stevens lay awake thinking. He realized something important. Love was not just about being present when things were calm. It was about staying steady when everything felt broken. The school called again, this time about Mark. He's not talking much, the teacher said. But he listens. He works hard. Mr. Stevens thanked her. At home, he tried something new. One evening, he brought out a notebook and set it on the table. We are going to write letters, he said. To who? Leo asked. To Mom, Mr. Stevens said. They sat together. Leo drew pictures. Mark wrote slowly, carefully. Mr. Stevens wrote too, his hand shaking at times. They did this many times over the next weeks. They laughed at old memories. They cried at others. Slowly, the house began to breathe again. One afternoon, Mark came home with a paper in his hand. I joined the school team, he said. That's great, Mr. Stevens smiled. I wanted her to know, Mark added quietly. She knows, Mr. Stevens said. Leo started sleeping in his own bed again. Sometimes he still woke at night, but he no longer panicked. Spring turned into early summer. The tree outside the window was full and green now. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sky change color, Leo leaned against Mr. Stevens. Are we still a family? He asked. Mr. Stevens wrapped an arm around both boys. Yes, he said. We are. And in that moment, even with the pain still present, something strong and unbreakable settled between them. They had lost something precious. But they were still standing. Together. Summer arrived like a deep breath after a long cry. The mornings were warmer. Light filled the house early, slipping through the curtains and waking everyone before the alarm. Mr. Stephen began to notice small changes that felt important. Leo started humming again while brushing his teeth. Mark stayed outside longer in the evenings, kicking a ball against the fence, his movements slow but steady. Life did not go back to the way it was before. It became something new. One Saturday morning, Mr. Stephen stood in the kitchen making pancakes. The smell filled the house. Leo ran in first, already talking. "I had a dream," he said. "Mom was in it." She was smiling. Mr. Stephen paused and looked at him. "That sounds like a good dream." Leo nodded. "She said we were okay." Mark came in next. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. "I think she would like this house now," Mark said quietly. Mr. Stephen felt warmth spread through his chest. "I think so too." After breakfast, they cleaned together. It was not perfect. Leo missed spots. Mark complained once. Mr. Stephen laughed when soap bubbles spilled onto the floor. These moments, simple and ordinary, felt almost sacred. That afternoon, they went to the park. It was the same park Mr. Stephen used to visit years ago, before everything broke apart. Children played. Parents talked. The sky was wide and blue. Mark joined a group of boys playing soccer. At first, he stayed back, watching. Then someone passed him the ball. He kicked it hard, surprising himself. When he scored, his face lit up with a smile Mr. Stephen had not seen in a long time. Leo ran to the swings. Mr. Stephen pushed him higher and higher. Again. Leo shouted, laughing. Mr. Stephen pushed and watched the joy in his son's face. He realized something then. Joy had not disappeared. It had only been waiting. As the weeks passed, routine settled in again. Mark went to practice twice a week. Leo learned to ride his bike without training wheels. Mr. Stephen worked hard, tired but focused. He made space for rest now. He learned to ask for help when he needed it. One evening, after dinner, Mark stayed behind while Leo went to his room. "Can I ask you something?" Mark said. "Of course," Mr. Stephen replied. Mark hesitated. "Do you ever feel guilty?" Mr. Stephen did not pretend. "Yes," he said. "Often." "For being happy?" Mark asked. "Yes," Mr. Stephen said. "Sometimes." Mark nodded. "Me too." They sat in silence for a moment. "I think it's okay," Mr. Stephen said finally. "She loved us. She wouldn't want us to stop living." Mark looked at him carefully, then nodded. That night, Mr. Stephen found an old photo album in a box. He brought it out and placed it on the table. "Let's keep this," he said. "And add to it." Leo ran in, excited. "Add what?" "Us," Mr. Stephen said. "Our life." They added drawings, school papers, photos from the park, a pressed leaf from the tree outside. The album grew slowly, page by page. One afternoon near the end of summer, a letter arrived from the school. It was about Mark. Mr. Stephen read it twice, smiling. Mark had been chosen as team captain. "That's amazing," Mr. Stephen said when he told him. Mark shrugged, but his eyes shone. "I tried." "You did more than try," Mr. Stephen said. "You stayed." The words hung between them. Yes, Mr. Stephen thought. That was it. Staying. On the first day of the new school year, Mr. Stephen walked both boys to the gate. Leo hugged him tightly before running inside. Mark stopped for a moment. "Thanks," he said. "For what?" Mr. Stephen asked. "For not leaving," Mark said. Mr. Stephen swallowed. "Thank you for letting me stay." As the seasons turned again, the pain softened. It did not disappear, but it no longer controlled every breath. There were still hard days. Days when Leo cried for no clear reason. Days when Mark went quiet again. Days when Mr. Stephen felt tired down to his bones. But there were also good days. Days filled with laughter, shared meals, small victories, and quiet understanding. One evening, long after the boys were asleep, Mr. Stephen stood in the hallway and looked at the closed doors of their rooms. He thought about the man he used to be. The man who ran from fear. The man who believed distance was safer than love. He was not that man anymore. Love had changed him. Not in a loud way. Not all at once. But slowly. Deeply. Through scraped knees and homework struggles. Through grief and forgiveness. Through staying when living felt easier. The next morning, Leo woke him by jumping onto the bed. "Wake up." Leo laughed. "We're late." Mr. Stephen laughed too and pulled him close. Down the hall, Mark called out, "Hurry up." The house filled with sound. Life moved forward. Not perfectly. But honestly. And as they stepped into the new day together, Mr. Stephen knew something he had once been too afraid to believe. Broken things can still grow strong. Families can heal. And love, when chosen again and again, can turn even the deepest loss into a reason to keep going. The end.